finance officer here. I'm going to be your MC for this morning. If you're a first-timer here, if you're a long-timer, we're happy you're here. If you are a first-timer, our vision here at Community Bible Church is to be an ordinary group of people living the extraordinary life in Jesus. So I just have actually, Pastor Steve's going to come up in a minute. He's going to walk us through his continuous sermon series in 1 Samuel. We're going to look at the rise and fall of King Saul, some comparisons between King Saul and King David. I just have a couple of announcements quickly before we get into Pastor Steve. So first of all, youth group is back on the Tuesday evening at 6:30. So just a couple of things I want to mention on that. If you don't have a youth member in your family, they're going through currently their exam period, which is very stressful. So we'd ask for some prayer for those members of our congregation. Also, we, as many of you know, we're going through a youth leader search right now, so we'd ask for prayer for that. Also, there's some devoted volunteers that are taking care of the youth in the meantime, trying to keep them engaged and growing. We'd ask for prayer for them as well. Second announcement, we have a potluck that we're doing. We usually do this once a month. It's coming up this Wednesday at 5:30, so we'd love to see you out here. It's a great way to meet people that you don't always sit beside at church. So we'll be happy to see as many people as we can on Wednesday. Just before I pass it over to Pastor Steve, we're at the end of January here. I thought it would be a really good time to check in on everybody's New Year's resolutions because we're a month in. So I've looked at a couple of stats. Well, maybe we'll make this interactive. I'll shower you with some really fascinating facts about New Year's resolutions in the meantime. So maybe just a quick show of hands. Who had a resolution this year? Okay, so all right, so you guys all had nothing to work on then. Is that what they're saying? So, okay, well, according to the article I was reading, anyway, 80% of Canadians had a resolution. So I guess we're just, we're exceeding that. We didn't have anything to work on. We're all perfect here, I guess. So anyway, I guess at the end of January, what they say is about 46% of Canadians have already dropped their resolution. So, that's just kind of a testament to the human being. They say a quarter of them don't even last through the first week. So maybe we'll just do Family Feud style too. So top 5, this is from last year, 2023, Canadian resolutions. What were the top 5 most common resolutions? Anybody have an idea? Exercising, yes. Eat better, yeah. Spend less, yeah. Drink less was another one. And I think number 5 was less screen time, less like social media time. So I guess that's kind of a newer resolution. Okay, one more. Actually, maybe a couple more. We'll see. You guys love it, right? So top five reasons why Canadians didn't achieve their resolutions. Too tired. Yes, lack of time was one. Not seeing results. Yeah, kind of lack of willpower, lack of support from your family, lack of money. There was a bunch of great excuses. For me, my resolution was to not squint when I MC, and this is clearly not working out very well for me. But anyway, I have a few more, but I think what I'll do, I'll save those to the end. We can listen to Pastor Steve, but first I'll turn it over to the worship team. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I'm going to invite you to stand, actually. Would you please do that? And this morning, you might notice, I'm going to highlight this, so maybe you will notice now. Maybe you wouldn't otherwise. But Pastor Steve's going to be talking about Saul and David and some of the differences of their reigns as king on earth in the Old Testament, as documented there. And often, as humans, much like those two men, you'll see, or you'll hear a little bit about, we're motivated by fear. And fear is like one of the most powerful motivators, but it's really not a good motivator, to be honest. I can't really think of any instance, maybe you can, we can chat afterwards, but where fear is a good motivator, maybe fear of, being too close to the edge is a good motivator. It's healthy to be back a little bit. Maybe there's one there. I thought of one. Okay. But fear can motivate us. And sometimes we don't recognize that. I talked a little bit with the band a little bit earlier, just, how fear can be something that we don't necessarily acknowledge. God, I have these fears and they're motivating me. I'm not doing that because I'm afraid. Or I avoid that because I'm afraid. And we can bring those fears to him. And because perfect love casts out fear. And we're going to sing that. And so fear is a little bit of a thread highlighting how God interacts with our fears and how we when we accept his love, that comes with no fear because he is for us. He is with us. He forgives us. He loves us. He doesn't abandon us. And so if I can just highlight that this morning as we're listening, as we're singing, as we're worshiping, as we're learning, when you're singing a song and, whether it's any one of the songs really, just be mindful of that fact. God, I'm bringing you my fear this morning, and it is not a healthy motivator in my life usually, and I want to honor you. And so I want to sing to you, and I want to trust, in spite of my human precondition almost to be afraid. I want to set that aside and focus on you and trust you. So please sing with us. Our praise, you bring revival. We lift our hands, you lift our eyes up. Where your love is found, there will be no fear. God, your kingdom come, your will be done here. On earth as in heaven, Spirit of God, pour out. Our hearts are wide open. Jesus, we need you now. Come have your way in this place. Break our walls down. Spirit of God, pour out. On earth as in heaven, Jesus, we need you now. We bring us, you bring redemption. You turn our chains into our freedom. Where your love is found, there will be no fear. God, your kingdom come, your will be done here. On earth as in heaven, Spirit of God, pour out. Our hearts are wide open. Jesus, we need you now. Come have your way in this place. Break our walls down. Spirit of God, pour out. On earth as in heaven, Jesus, we need you now. In your presence there is peace. In your presence we are free. There's no better place to be. There's no better place to be. In your presence there is truth. In your presence mountains move. We forever run to you. We forever run to you. In your presence there is peace. In your presence we are free. There's no better place to be. There's no better place to be. In your presence there is myself in you above all things. At your feet, love, mercy, walk humbly with you, God, in all things, in all ways. Walk humbly with you, God. It all comes down to this, to be your hands and feet. Good news to all the world. The truth will set us free. Actively, walk humbly with you, God, in all things, in all ways. Walk humbly with you, God. It's beauty for ashes, it's morning to dancing. It's closer and closer, the kingdom of heaven. It's beauty for ashes, it's morning to dancing. It's closer and closer, the kingdom of heaven. Years from now we'll see the fruit our hands have sown. Faith just like a seed, the only way it grows. At your feet, love, mercy, walk humbly with you, God, in all things, in all ways. Walk humbly with you, God. At your feet, love, mercy, walk humbly with you, God, in all things, in all ways. Walk humbly with you, God. You never said it would be easy. You never said there'd be no pain. But you promised you'd go with me, and your promises you always keep. But I confess how much I need you. I confess that I'm weak. I can't promise I won't fail you, but your promises will not fail me. When I'm in the valley, I will fear no evil. When enemies surround me, you prepare a table. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. There is beauty in the struggle. No, you don't waste a single day. Your presence is my shelter. Your presence is my victory. Whoa. When I'm in the valley, I will fear no evil. When enemies surround me, you prepare a table. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. but I have seen enough to know you are faithful. I can't see it all, but I have seen enough to know you are faithful. I can't see it all, but I have seen enough to know you are faithful. I can't see it all, but I have seen enough to know you are faithful. When I'm in the valley, I will fear no evil. When enemies surround me, you prepare a table. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. When I'm in the valley, I will fear no evil. When enemies surround me, you prepare a table. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. You may be seated.
When I'm in the valley, I will fear no evil. A lot of things we can be afraid of. Breaking a guitar string. Or losing my voice in the middle of a sermon. I don't know what you are afraid of, or if there's things that sometimes you say, oh, that would be the worst. That'd be most embarrassing. I'd be so embarrassed if that happened. You know, there's things that happen in life that we fear, and we're gonna look at a story of someone where fear played a significant role in his life. But before I get into that, I was past because we were talking about times of transition as the series we're in. In fact, this is the last one we're going to do on this. I've been going to kind of speed things up today with racing through the rest of some key verses in 1 Samuel. And I've been talking about change and transition, and one of the guys in the church sent me a slide deck because he had done some teaching at work on change, and this is one of the slides that he talked about when leaders and bringing change in and how that can be challenging. And he had an interesting principle here in this slide. It was 94 slides, I think. I picked one out. But this one kind of caught my attention because it's the idea of melting and refreezing. And it uses that idea because sometimes things we have to melt maybe the old infrastructure, the old way of doing things before we can rebuild it and then refreeze it into the new standard, the systemic ways we're going to run things for here on. And to bring about those changes can sometimes create fear and pushback. And he makes note that often there's failure in that thawing. The thawing would be the time when we start to vision and cast and say, this is where we're going, and these, creating some discontent for the status quo, and these things need to change. And that's sort of the thawing out, and that can be discomforting for some people, right? It can be challenging because change is sometimes scary. There's the unknown, and or what if this doesn't work? What if we fail? And so there's those sort of feelings that tie in. But when you melt the old away and then make some movement and start to rebuild new norms and new infrastructure, or whatever the change might be, and then you refreeze that and say, this is the way we're going. And so you can see that being an interesting illustration, showing that fear is actually the thing that keeps us from bringing about change. Fear because of the pushback or the unknown or failure or whatever. But that happens when we change in leadership, and that was certainly true in Israel. We've been talking about in 1 Samuel a bunch of changes. We talked about the change, and it was a time of big change in Israel. There was the end of kind of the priesthood as being key leaders at Shiloh, at least, with Eli and his sons. And we talked about that in the early chapter, part of 1 Samuel. And then there was a new person came up named Samuel who was listening to God. He wasn't just doing the religious traditions and just carrying out the religious ways, but someone who's willing to listen to and respond and obey God. And he became the new leader that God was able to use. And so there was a big change in leadership. A second one was a theological change that needed to happen because people were getting used to God and the ark and just kind of treating it like a genie in a bottle. Like this was if the ark was with us, it's some kind of special power or and our lucky charm, or however you wanted to do it. But God is so much bigger than the ark and the God in the box idea. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago. And then last week we talked about the change from a judge, because there's a period of judges, like 16 judges that ruled in the land. And then there was, then moved into the time of the kings. And Samuel was that bridge in between. He was sort of the last judge, a prophet that God used in this interim time of transition. And then today I want to talk a little bit about a heart and a change of heart and what drives our heart. So we jump into the story in chapter 9 of 1 Samuel. And Samuel is looking for the first king. The people last week said, we want a king. And he goes to the house of Kish. God directs him that way. And Kish had a son named Saul, the scriptures tell us. As handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel. And he was a head taller than anyone else. So he's impressive. He was handsome, he had great appearance, and Samuel goes and tells him, God has chosen you to be the next king. And when he tells him that, interestingly, Saul's response is maybe some of you would respond this way. He responded and says, "But I'm not, I'm a nobody, right? Why me?" And this is the way he says it. But I'm not. Am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe of Israel? And is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribes of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me? I mean, who am I? You would want me to be the king. I have nothing. And one thing you like about Saul right from the outset when we first meet him is the sense of humility that he has. That's likable in a leader because he's not in for the power, the influence, the limelight. It's not about that for him. But he just has this, but he also is just questioning, why would you choose me? Anyway, they go ahead with the ceremony and they begin. They're going to invite people in from all over the land to anoint him as the new king. And when they do so, it comes time to anoint him as king and they can't find him. And they look all around and they can't find Saul anywhere. And they're asking around. And finally, Samuel prays and asks God. And it says, so they inquired further of the Lord, has the man come here yet? And the Lord said, yes, he's hidden himself among the supplies. So God directs Samuel in telling him that Saul has gone out and he's hiding in the luggage room, without all the supplies. And all these people come to anoint him as king, and he's hiding. And you wonder, why is that? And you start to think, well, maybe it's not just humility. Maybe there's something else here. That maybe there's a fear, or maybe there's something going on in his life that he'd hide out, in this time. Maybe he doesn't like the spotlight, or doesn't want to be in front of people. Maybe, what is it that's holding him back? Anyway, so they find him, they bring him out, they anoint him king, and Samuel gives them some instructions. And this is what he says to him in chapter 10. He says, the Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, Saul, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. The Spirit of God's going to come upon you. In the Old Testament times, the Spirit of God would come upon a person, especially you see it during the times of the judges, when the Spirit of God would come upon them and enable them to do a great feat or protect Israel or do something. And Samuel's saying, the Spirit of God's going to come upon you and he's going to do something. He's going to change you. How is he going to change? In the New Testament, when a person becomes a follower of Jesus, The Bible tells that the Spirit of God comes and lives in us right away. He's with us always. And that's interesting because the Spirit of God is in us. And what does He want to do? It's the same thing. He wants to change us too. What does that look like? He goes on to say, once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do. For a very important phrase, God is with you. God is with you. You know, you don't have to be fearful. You don't have to question God. Just know that God is with you in everything you do. And then he gives them one instruction. One thing, as a king, this is the first thing, the most important thing you got to know, this word from God. Now go down ahead to me in Gilgal, and I will, this is a town down near Philistine country, and I will surely come down to you and to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. We're going to have a worship time with God. But you must wait. Here's the important thing. You must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what you're to do. So it's important that you wait, okay, for 7 days, and I'll come down and I'll give you the next steps, okay? So there's one instruction as a new king. So God's going to come and He's going to change you. The Spirit of God's going to come powerfully on you. But there's one thing you got to do. Just wait till I get there. So, as Saul, it goes on to say, as Saul turned to leave, God changed Saul's heart, and all these signs were fulfilled in that day. God did a powerful transformation in this young man. And he started off making some great decisions, doing well as a king. In fact, one of the first things, there's 3 problems. As soon as you take a leadership position, everyone figures, well, you're going to have the means and the ability to answer and help us out, right? So he's hit with 3 problems almost immediately. The first problem was some people from Jabesh, a neighboring town, came over and said, listen, we've got a problem. Our neighbors, the Ammonites, have told us that we are to serve them, and they're going to destroy us. Oh, I was going to build this chart here. And here's some of the things, just to talk about what we've been going through. So, Saul had a great start, as I said. His appearance, his good attitude, he was anointed king, and he was indwelt by the Spirit of God. Okay, so so he's off to a good start. But as I said, there's 3 problems. The people of Jabesh said, our neighbors, the Ammonites, are going to come, and they say they're going to gouge out the right eye of each man in our village if we don't serve them and do what they want us to do. And when Saul heard their words, it says in 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 6, it says, when Saul heard their words, the Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, and he burned with anger. Like, this is not right. This is wrong. There was an injustice being done here. And it seems to be spurred on by the Spirit of God. And that anger, that injustice that he saw happening, he wanted to do something with it. And so he goes down and he leads them in a battle, and he frees them from their neighbors, the Ammonites, and they're victorious. And they don't lose their right eyes. And God watches over them. So it's like all of a sudden the Spirit of God just helped them with this situation. And then another thing happened, as this would be a second problem. And the second problem was they noticed that when Saul led the people down to Jabesh, some of the people didn't follow him. Like, some of the people said, we don't know if we like this king. And I'm not sure we're going to follow him. And there were some people that outrightly opposed Saul. And so the chat afterwards was, well, what are you going to do with those people? What are you going to do with your enemies? Typically, when a king would come to power, then they would kill and destroy all their enemies, right? And make sure everybody was in alignment with the king. You need to, set things straight and let people know they have to fall in line with what you say, Saul. But this is Saul's response in chapter 11, verse 13. He says, no one will be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel. And so you just see some wisdom and some compassion, perhaps, here towards those that were maybe not pulling in line. And so go back to my chart there, and we continue to build it. There was he had a good start. He looked like a king. He had a good attitude. He's anointed king. The Spirit of God came upon him. There's this justice, the sense of justice. He had a victory at Jabesh, and he showed compassion to his enemies. And everything's going right, and he's doing so well. And then everything changes. And as I read through this, the thing that stood out to me as I stopped and as we worked through this, just ask yourself, what changes? What was it about Saul that turned everything around? And we read on in 1 Samuel chapter 13. He goes down to Gilgal. That's what he had been told by Samuel, right? To go down and wait 7 days. So he goes down there, and some of the Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. So some of the Hebrews, the Jews that were with Saul, actually left and went back to their hometowns. Some of them even to the other side of the river, so a long piece away. They're not going to be much help. So Saul remains at Gilgal with his troops with him, and they're quaking with fear. So they're really afraid of what's going to happen here, because down at Gilgal were the Philistines, probably one of the most powerful neighbors they had. And they have created, they have a gathering army there, and Saul's like, what are we going to do? And Saul's kryptonite, I believe, was fear. Remember how because he was hiding, he didn't even want to come out, we thought maybe it was humility, but maybe it was just fear that kept him from doing what God would want him to do. And here they are, looking out over the enemy lines, a larger, more powerful enemy, and they're quaking with fear. Now, we know that Samuel had said, hey, when God is with you, you don't have to be fearful. The Spirit of God would come upon him and help him to overcome this, if he was willing to continue following. But fear has a way of strangling and getting in and destroying people's lives. Let me read on the next verse. It says, Saul says he waited 7 days, because that's what Samuel had said. He'd be there back in 7 days. And the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. They started to leave. And he's like, we need everybody we can get. This is not good. We don't stand a chance anyway against the Philistines. And now it's looking even worse. And so they're afraid. And so he says, we got to do something, he thinks. So he, in the next verse, he said, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, then Samuel arrived. Oh, you're finally here. Yeah, but you weren't supposed to go ahead without me. You were to go there and wait. Yeah, but the people were leaving. I was losing my troops. And so he went ahead and did what Samuel would have done in the burnt offering, the fellowship offerings, as the prophet, as the priest in Israel. It was his job, but Saul couldn't wait anymore. And because of fear, because of impatience, he moved ahead, and just as he did, Samuel arrived. He had one thing he was supposed to do, and he didn't do it. He goes on to say, Samuel goes on to say, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. One thing you were told to do, and he didn't do it. It didn't take much. And God said, I'm moving on. I'm going to find someone who's a man, and interesting how he describes him, the next king. It'll be a man after my own heart. Someone who is willing to obey me. Someone who's willing to do what's right. Someone who has a heart for me. Now, there's a bunch of skirmishes that go on between Israel and the Philistines over the next few years. And Saul makes some bonehead decisions. One of them, in chapter 14, the next chapter, he says this. He stands before the troops and said, cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies. So none of the troops tasted food all day. Like, you're in a battle. You need your energy. You need your food. Why would you say something like this? His men are weary by the end of the day. They don't feel like fighting because they're so hungry. Like, why would you say this? Why would you do this? Especially when there was lots of food. They came across a bunch of honey, too. And it's like, well, can't eat it. It's all said. And then another move in the next chapter, they go and they win a battle. And Samuel comes to him and says, why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder when God told you not to, and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? And time again, he kind of made mistakes and didn't follow God wholeheartedly. And finally God says, okay, it's time for a replacement king. And he says to Samuel, and I want you to go out and anoint the new king. And he goes and selects David. It's interesting that there's an interesting note in here in the text in 1 Samuel 16 where it says, now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul. Remember when the Spirit of God came upon him and he did some amazing things? And at this point in chapter 16, the Spirit of God departs from him. And then Goliath shows up. And the Philistine says, this is Goliath, the Philistine, says, this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. They cowered in fear and were afraid. And then this young man named David, with a slingshot, steps forward and says, I'll take him on. And David actually goes on, takes him on, and kills Goliath. And all the people start cheering for David and like, he's our hero. And Saul then becomes jealous. And jealousy drives him to try to kill David, the one who'd saved them. He tries to kill David. And then a real sad note towards the end of Saul's life. I skip a few chapters. It says that Saul then said to his attendants, find me a woman who is a medium, or like a witch, so I may go and inquire of her. There is one in Endor, they said. So he's looking for advice. He's looking for a word, and so he goes to the dark side. And it wasn't long after this that actually he died. Death by suicide. He took his own life. And it's just a tragic story. Let me put it together on the chart as we walk through it again. So in our chart, you've seen the positives, on the left side of the screen. We've already talked about that. And then I've just read a few verses that turned. And I think fear was the turning point. It was a turning point when he faced Goliath. It was a turning point when he was quaking at fear that first time and went ahead with the worship instead of waiting for Samuel. And just feeling fear, impatience, disobedience. We see God's Spirit leaving him. Then we see foolish decisions about not eating food and cowardly behavior when Goliath came, and jealousy over David, and ends up consulting a medium. And this seems to just spiral downhill. And if I was to synthesize this and say, well, what changed? What happened in this life, in his life? I think probably one of the biggest factors was fear. For Saul, it was a heart of fear, where David, it pointed out, had a heart for God. And so God made a change from Saul to the next king was David, simply because David was driven by his heart for God and to please God. And Saul was driven by a heart of fear. And the question I ask myself is and I ask you too, is what drives that fear in you? What fears do you have? I wouldn't ask, do you have fear? Because I think everybody deals with some kind of fear. What fears do you have? Is it fear of failure? Fear of public speaking? Fear of missing out on something? The fear of dying? The fear of being alone? The fear of pandemic? The fear of war? The fear of climate change? The fear of corrupt government? The fear of germs? The fear of weight gain? There's a lot of stuff that fear is something that sits under our emotions and drives us to do things. For me, as I looked at it, I thought one of the big ones for me is the fear of rejection. And even though I don't like to admit it, just like we don't like to admit our fears or own up to them, when we look at it ourselves and we say, yeah, that drives me sometimes. It makes me fearful about wanting to go out and share my faith with people because they may reject me for it, right? Or to stand up for God in something because and maybe there are things that drive us. I love David. You know, he was so courageous and it seemed like fearless. So here's maybe the question, the next question then is, how do we overcome fear? How do we overcome it? We don't want it driving us or holding us back, keeping us from realizing our dreams. So how do we get over those fears? Because they can be really debilitating. I read a story this week, Jean Henson. She was traveling, went south for winter break and to get away from the weather up here, and she went down to St. Lucia and was running along the beach, getting some exercise with her husband that morning. And I guess along the beach, this particular beach, there were some exercise stations. And she says, you know, one station they'd stop and do pull-ups, and another one is push-ups or sit-ups or different activities they could do, exercises they make their way along the beach. And then one of them she came to was you had to climb up and go across on a bit of a large wire, and it had things to hold on to, but you had to kind of walk across. And when she looked at it, she says, no, I'm not going to do that. That looks too scary. And so she didn't. And they went along the beach and went home. And that afternoon, she was out on a sailboat, and the winds came up, and they were quite strong, and the sailboat was being thrown around, but she loved it and was soaking it all in. And then she thought to herself, you know, this is way more dangerous than walking in that rope, you know, that tightrope thing that I did this morning. Why wouldn't I do that? What was I afraid of? And so the next morning, when they went down the beach to exercise again, and she says she stopped at every station, including that one, and she went up on it, and it was a little challenging at first to climb up. Must have been fear of heights, and she made her way across and went down. She said to conquer that and realize that fear was not going to hold me back was freeing. And that may be a simple illustration, but it illustrates something, that sometimes we do have to just face our fears. My wife is afraid of heights, but she still goes skiing with me. And it's hard at first, but she works at it to overcome it. Saul was afraid too. He had God's Spirit that would be with him. He didn't need to be afraid, but he forgot. And he let fear creep in and dictate what he did. I love what David says. When he faced Goliath, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, he says this: "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Interestingly, I guess a bear attacked him when he was watching the sheep as a young boy. And God helped him. And then a lion came by. And God helped him again. And he learned from those situations. Not that he asked for them or planned them out. They just happened. And God preserved and helped him in those times. And he said, hey, God will help me in facing this Goliath, this Philistine. And he had this unwavering trust that God would be there for him. I went to artificial intelligence and asked them the question, how do you overcome fear? And this is what my computer spit out back to me. How do you overcome fear? You identify and acknowledge your fear. You then educate yourself about that fear. You challenge the negative thoughts in your mind, and then you gradually expose yourself to the fear. You visualize what success will look like, and then you seek support. You get people to cheer you on, maybe even professional help if you're still struggling with it. I said, okay, there's some good practical things to help overcome fear. It's what the lady on the beach, Jen Henson, did when she had to face that fear of heights and challenging going across that rope. But there's something missing from this list, right? And certainly David, he couldn't go onto the computer and say, how do I overcome fear? He couldn't ask AI, artificial intelligence, how do I deal with it? And so he had a different way of dealing with it. He was told that he understood that God was with him. And for him, that created a fearless spirit. And as a Christian, when a person asks Christ to come into your life, God's Spirit comes with us. And he wants to change us. And he wants to make us fear less. Lord, might be our prayer, Lord, change my heart. Samuel said to Saul, God would change your heart from fear to faith. God, would you change my heart? Fear has a way of getting in and influencing us. And there are giants. We will face giants. They'll come up when we least expect it. We will face giants who will want to make us cower and move back and not step forward. And God says, will you step forward in faith? You believe that I am with you? There's, I read this week that there is a verse of the Bible that is the most read verse. This is the U version of the Bible. They do by countries. And in South America, the number one verse Googled and read and highlighted and marked in the whole Bible is Joshua 1:9. Thought that's interesting. This is the top verse in South America. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Isn't that a great verse? Do you believe it? Because if you do, fears will shrink and shrivel. Fears will not control you or drive you. God doesn't just say, don't be afraid, but he gives you the reason why you don't need to be afraid. Because God will be with you wherever you go. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, I thank you for this time this morning to be reminded again of the power that you want to do in our lives. You change lives. You transform. That's your business. Your Spirit produces fruit and character in our lives. And one of those things you want to do is take away fear. God, I just pray for this congregation, because there may be people here who have dreams, but they've been too afraid to chase them. They've wanted to step out and try or do something, but the fear of failure has held them back. Lord, maybe they've needed to speak up about someone, or about you to someone, and they've just felt fear closing in on them. Lord, we want to live the life you've designed for us, not driven by fear, but driven by faith in you. So help us, Lord, as we move forward and as we make decisions and as we walk with you. Just remind us that you're there. and that you're with us, and you'll help us. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. Would you please rise? We're going to close again with a song. Call. You are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, it cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield. No troubles linger still. Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. My strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me. Yours is the victory. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies, he is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. You are faithful. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
Hopefully Pastor Steve can weave his message into my theme of New Year's resolution. So, and I think, I think he did at a certain point. I think we talked about change in Israel, fear. I think the overarching theme is that if left, to our own devices, I think humans are going to disappoint, right? We're going to disappoint each other, disappoint ourselves. I think we have to have our faith and our hope grounded in the Lord. So, without further ado, here are my last fun facts that you guys were waiting for. Sorry, you guys can have a seat, right? So, yeah.
Sermon 2 is just about to begin.
Sorry, make yourself comfortable. So I know, okay, so out of the top 100 cities in North America, what is the easiest city or what's the city that's you're most likely to have your resolutions stay the whole year? I know we have some Americans in here. It's an American city. It's on the West Coast. Any guesses? California is not a city, but no, it's not Los Angeles. Actually, it's Seattle. So, and the reason I bring it up, it's because they talk about the green infrastructure. They're focused on active lifestyle. They have a solid job market, tech. It kind of sounds a lot like Ottawa, actually. So maybe this is even though none of you had resolutions, maybe this is a good city to have a resolution. And last point about resolutions: is it more likely that a man or a woman will have the resolution through the year? Okay, if I reword it, is it more likely that a man or a woman will say that they had the resolutions throughout the year? So it's a man, apparently, according to my research anyway. So, all right, two last things before we're dismissed. So if anything stirred you in the message or in the worship, if you'd like to pray with somebody, we always have a prayer team up here at the front. Special for this week, we're going to actually, in maybe 10 minutes or so, we're going to all come, well, if you're interested, to come together to pray for the youth. We did talk about some of the things the youth themselves are going through, the church here with the leadership search. So in 10 minutes or so, we'll all gather here if you're interested to pray for them. With that, you're dismissed. So have a good week. We'll see you next week.